All right, what is up, guys? This is Ryan with Elevate Security. Now, in the previous video we had talked about, or one of the previous videos, it might not necessarily be the last one, we had talked about cookies. Now that's going to come in handy here as we talk about session management and what is session management and what sort of vulnerabilities could come along with it. Well, your session and managing the session is just, once you log into a website, you have an active session. You usually receive like an active cookie, right, that the server sends out to you upon logging in, or even if you're not logged in, sometimes you'll have a cookie as well, just so they know who you are as a user and what you've done on the page, or whatever information they need, right? So this is called having an active session. Once you're logged in, you got your cookie, all that, right? You have an active session. Now, there's a few ways to terminate the session. One, there's probably going to be a log out button on the website somewhere if you logged in, and doing that should log you out and should thus invalidate your cookie, invalidate your session, right? When you log out, your session should no longer be valid, right? So, that is one potential vulnerability, not very commonly seen, but yeah, it would be a vulnerability, of course, if you hit log out on a page, but someone could replay your cookie and still, get on your session, then it's just not doing what its one purpose is to do, and that's to log you out. It's obviously not logging you out then. So that's not a vulnerability commonly seen, but I suppose that if log out didn't actually log you out, that would be a vulnerability, right? Another way to invalidate your session should be to close your browser. Like when you completely close your browser, it should terminate your session, right? This is one that is a little bit more commonly seen as a vulnerability because not all applications do this. Now, yeah, the best security practice would be when the user closes their browser, closes their window with the active session, to just go ahead and terminate their session, like, invalidate their cookie, and then it's no longer valid, right? Now, where this vulnerability, how does it actually play out in practice? Why would this be considered a vulnerability? All right, so now imagine you're at a coffee shop, or not a coffee shop, let's say you're at like a library, right? You're at a library and you're using like one of those public computers. You know how a lot of libraries nowadays have public computers that anyone can just log on and use. Now, say you log on to some kind of shopping site and you browse around at some items on there. You log into your account so you can look at all the things that are on sale or whatever, right? And now say you're done browsing around. Maybe you bought an item, maybe you didn't. Either way, you're like, okay, I'm done for now. I'm gonna go check out some books at this library. So you turn off you exit out the window, and then you walk off. Now, if they don't terminate your session after you close your browser, which is a vulnerability known as session fixation, because your session remains fixated, I suppose, what could happen is the next user that uses that computer, he goes to that site and he's logged in as you, and now he can make purchases through your account and stuff. He hijacked your session. Maybe he didn't try to in this scenario, but there could be more nefarious circumstances, I suppose, where someone would try to hijack your session intentionally and be successful in doing so, because there's that session fixation vulnerability at play. They didn't invalidate your session when you closed the window and you thought you were logged out, or you thought your session was invalid when it in fact wasn't. So that's why that's a vulnerability. And that's not just to say it has to do with local attacks. It can also apply to even network-based attacks and stuff if they're not properly handling your session, right? So that is like a pretty decently commonly seen vulnerability related to session management. Now, what is another one? Session expiration. That is another one that you commonly see. This is when, and it's almost by design now, unfortunately, as you see things like single sign-on and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, you sign on once and your session is like pretty much valid forever until you actually hit log out. That's one you see all the time. But yeah, session expiration can be considered a vulnerability. Now this can also be like, this really depends on the application if they want to go the extra mile to protect you or not. With session expiration, what it means is that your session never goes invalid. So even if you're just sitting there idle on a page like for over 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever, and they don't automatically log you out because you've been sitting there forever, that's technically could be viewed as a vulnerability of session expiration. Now, one thing you'll see with this vulnerability is that, there's certain sites you can think about, probably like Facebook and stuff like that, where you're like, when was the last time I logged on to that, right? So it is kind of at the discretion of whether they want to implement this or not, but definitely things that are more critical, you'll see them implementing this, right? Like pretty much every bank site. Like I think that's probably, honestly, I'm not 100% on this, but it's probably a legal requirement that they implement this, I would imagine. But yeah, pretty much every bank site that I know of, if you sit there idle for even like 5 minutes, they'll invalidate your session, they'll log you out, and you have to log back in. And that's why they're properly handling the session management. But really, I do agree that it really depends on the site. I wouldn't worry about this vulnerability personally if it wasn't like critical stuff like banking. Like if it was just like a forum where who uses forums in 2020? Like everyone pretty much uses Discord and stuff like that. But I don't know. I suppose if it was like a site that you weren't really housing like your critical data on, it was just like, say like a streaming site or something. Yeah, like a streaming site, right? Like Netflix. Imagine how annoying that would be if Netflix signed you out when you're inactive for like 5 minutes or like 30 minutes, right? That'd be super annoying. So I don't even think it should be implemented there. So these are just kind of, a lot of security as well is kind of like, it depends on, the application. It's not very in a vacuum, like this is a vulnerability, this is not a vulnerability. You do have to consider like the application, like what is the data, what is the risk, stuff like that. That's why that's a whole nother career called like risk analysis and stuff like that, So those are the big ones that come to mind in terms of session management and properly handling the sessions. Now, one thing you might be thinking is, if after I log in I receive a cookie, right, as part of my session, then does that mean if attacker got my cookie, then he could hijack my session? Yes, in fact, a hacker can do that if he got your cookie, which would be pretty much impossible to do unless you gave it away or like the site was already compromised through some other kind of means, I will say. But a lot of times, with social engineering or whatever, maybe he gets you to click on something and they don't set the HTTP only flag on that on their application. So then he's able to carry out a JavaScript payload that will read your cookie, and then he can hijack your session. So yeah, that is possible. That is one downside to the whole cookie thing. If someone gets your cookie, if an attacker gets your cookie, then he can impersonate you and hijack your session. So that is one of the limitations of the setup, I do suppose. But yeah, definitely important to note. And but yeah, those are pretty much the session related vulnerabilities, or the main ones that come to mind. Definitely not an all-inclusive list or anything like that. If I did miss anything big, in your opinion, let me know. Go ahead and let me know in the comments section below, and maybe I can discuss it further in a future video or something like that. Or if you just have any questions or general comments, also feel free to post it down below, and I will see you guys in the next video.